Teacher, we always confuse to identify between acid and alkali. What is the easiest way to identify between these two, teacher?
So this is the most frequent question that I will receive when it comes to this chapter, which is acid, base and salt. So most of students have confusing on how to differentiate between acid and base. So don't worry, because together with me today, Teacher Shamimi will look into this chapter with ways how to identify between acid and alkali. So here we go. So for the learning outcome, at the end of the lesson, students should be able to identify acid and alkali, and students should be able to list 3 ways how to identify acid and alkali. So how to identify between acid and alkali? So the first one is that you need to know what is the acid and also the alkali. So based on the Arrhenius story, the role of water, which is when acid dissolves in water, it will produce hydrogen ion, while for the alkali, it will produce hydroxide ion. For example, when sodium hydroxide, it will produce hydroxide ion that move freely in the water. The next way to identify acid and alkali is based on the changes of the litmus paper. So when you dip into the solution, for example the unknown solution, you dip the litmus paper and you find out that blue litmus paper turn to red, it is an acid solution. And when you dip the red litmus paper into the unknown solution and the red litmus paper turn to blue, it is an alkali. So the easiest way how to identify the acid and alkali based on the changes of the litmus paper is you need to memorize this kind of term, which is di sambal kali. Is the M is indicate the red litmus paper and the B indicate the blue litmus paper. So the arrow itself showing that when the red turn to blue litmus paper, it is alkali, and when the blue turn to red litmus paper, it is an acid. So it is easy, right, to identify the acid and alkali based on these changes of litmus paper. Do you get it? Oops! Don't worry, because we have one more ways to identify between acid and also alkali. Yes, for the next way is the pH value. So for the pH value, you need to know what is pH value is. So the pH value is the concentration of hydrogen ion in aqueous solution. So do you have know this kind of scale? Do you have ever seen somewhere? No? Alright, so we will take it together. Okay, so as you guys can see in this picture, it is about the scale, which is when it is acid, pH value is lower than 7, and when it comes to the alkali, the pH value is more than 7. So what do you think pH 7 is? Yes, it's true. The pH 7 is a neutral. So the example for the pH 7 is water, because it is a neutral. Most of the students also confused about what is alkali and what is basic. You need to know there is a different things between these two. All the alkali is bases, but not all the bases are alkali. Did you know why? Definition of base itself is substance that react with acid, it will produce salts and also water. So for the example is that metal oxide and metal hydroxide. So as you guys can see in this picture, it shows that when the calcium hydroxide react with the nitric acid, it will produce a salts and also water. So I think that's all for today's sessions, and if you have any question regarding to this topic, can just hit me up, okay? So far, do you know how to identify between acid and alkali after you watch this video?